Just have some comments. This will be a good episode for you. It's about F ratio versus field of view. I think you need a light possibly up top or underneath, shining up. Maybe. No, I have to today because she can't see it. Can't see it because.
All I'm trying to do is white that out.
Oh, because it's too dark.
Yeah.
It's too dark with that tree and that back. Yes, I know what you're doing.
No, we can mess with that one.
No, that one's blue.
Okay. We already got Mark Eastburn in here. Howdy from East Texas. And of course, Beatrice Hines as well. I don't know if anybody can actually hear me, but I'm helping Scott.
I don't know if anybody can hear us either. He said our mics were hot.
Yeah, he did. So I'm assuming they can. No, usually we talk. Oh, yeah, they can hear us. There's Jim. Jim's Astros. What's going on, buddy? And Miss Beatrice Hines from Belgium. Almost. Howdy from San Diego. We hear you, Tyler, from Harold Locke. Billy's Astro is also in. Amazing that everybody can stop in and see. Well, you can't see us yet, but you will momentarily. You will momentarily. So we're using a new studio stage because why not? We have it, so we might as well use it.
That's right. And pretty soon you'll have a makeup artist.
I'm not getting a makeup artist, Annie.
100%. Yes.
Nope. It will take away from the realism.
It sounds better to actually hear you guys instead of hearing all the customer service reps taking phone calls.
It's what, Scott?
What?
I said it sounds better.
Mm-hmm.
That's better.
Is it better now?
In order for NASA to map and explore the region around the lunar South Pole, we need to precisely define a system of latitude and longitude on the moon, including the exact location of the South Pole itself. In the coordinate system adopted by the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter mission, the South Pole is here, on the rugged rim of Shackleton Crater. If you stood on this treacherous spot, you'd see the sunlit rim of the crater encircling a permanently shadowed abyss that's 2.5 miles deep, over twice that of the Grand Canyon, covering an area over 130 square miles. As we return to the lunar surface, three-dimensional maps like this will help guide astronauts to safe landing sites in the challenging landscape of the moon's South Pole.
And that one's going on. You can adjust it with the ISO if need be.
Well, hello, everybody. This is Scott Roberts with Explore Scientific and the Explore Alliance, and this is the 33rd Focus on Astrophotography program. Our special guest is Jeffery Horne, and his special guest is Wade Prunty today. So it's great to have you guys on. I'm going to turn the show over to Tyler Bowman, who is being co-hosted with Annie Scarborough. So
that was my special guest. Why did you have to ruin it?
A little scary to have Tyler. It's a little scary to have Tyler and I in the same area at the same time.
It's comical. It's like having Wade. It's like having Wade in the chat. It's a comical relief.
It actually is 100%.
So, guys, today's episode is going to all be about focal ratio versus field of view, and what's a good, for beginning. And that's why I brought Annie in, because she's a beginner astrophotographer, and she can definitely pick the brains of Jeff Horne because he does a lot of wide field astrophotography. Like this dude is mind-blowing. Definitely pick the brains of Jeff Horne because he does a lot of volume in the background, so I apologize for that. Jeff Horne does a lot of wide field astrophotography, and I know Wade Prunty does it as well, but he's also got what is it, an 8-inch or a 9 1/4, Wade?
I have a 9 1/4 Schmidt category.
He's got a 9 1/4 Schmidt, so he's got a real tight field of view.
Oh.
So that's what the episodes are going to be about. It's just field or focal F ratio versus field of view. I'll get it in here in a minute. But Jeff, in case nobody knows about you, and Wade, we'll get to you here in a second after Jeff. Tell us a little bit about yourself, why you started in astrophotography, and then go from there.
Yeah. So yeah, Jeffery Horne. I got interested in astronomy when I was a kid. I think my story is probably similar to a lot of people's stories. My father has always been into astronomy. And when I was, 5 or 6 years old, I remember him pulling up his old C8 and then showing me Saturn. And he, had colored filters so you could see the different bands under different colors. And I was, from that moment on, I was just hooked. And so I've just been into it ever since then. Started getting into astrophotography much later. Never really had a nice telescope until probably 3 years ago or so. And so started off with a Celestron C8 doing astrophotography. And then got, my father gave me his Explore Scientific ED80, which got me a little more into the wide field stuff. And then just kept experimenting. I've done some lunar stuff, some planetary stuff, a lot of nebulas, and now I also have a RASA, 8-inch RASA. So speaking of F ratio, it's super fast. And then just always, to me, the idea of doing really wide field, narrow band stuff was really, really interesting to me. I live in Nashville, Tennessee. It's a Bortle 8 sky, so there's a lot of light pollution to deal with. So doing any kind of unfiltered stuff is mostly out of the question for me. But the idea of shooting super wide field, really long integrations with narrow band, I could just envision it in my head, what it would look like and what that experience would be like. So I just got really into that, and that's kind of become something I really enjoy doing. I love the perspective that it gives. A lot of people zoom in on targets and get super close and get the really fine detail. I like doing really long integration times, having multiple targets in one field of view.
Yeah.
It gives you kind of a frame of reference for all of these other individual targets that you see all the time. And it's really interesting, I think, when you can see like, oh, I had no idea that the tadpoles and flaming star were like right next door to the Spaghetti Nebula, all in one field of view. It's just, I really like the perspective and frame of reference that wide field stuff gives you. So yeah, I was the director of marketing at OPT for about a year during the kind of the heart of COVID. And so got to learn a bit more about the industry and meet a ton of people that are in this field. I know a lot of us astrophotographers, it's a very lonely and solo hobby, or it can be, like, Nashville's a big city and, 1 million plus people. And I don't really have anybody here that I can talk to or go down the road and just chat with. I'm sure there are people that do it, but it's just, it was really great to have that job and get to meet a ton of people. And now it's, most of my friends are astrophotographers now. So yeah, that's a bit about me. I really enjoy wide field stuff. I'm gonna get it out of my system someday and break out my Celestron 8-inch again, and probably the RASA again. I'd love to at some point get a larger refractor. And it's another thing I really enjoy about wide field stuff is you really get to learn the sky doing wide field astrophotography. So once I feel like I've imaged a lot of it, and then I can go back, I'm starting to learn the parts that are interesting to me.
Yeah.
So like taking a wide field Cygnus, for example, then as you know, you spend however many hours, 50, 60 hours imaging something and then processing it, you really are kind of forced to learn every little bit that's going on in that region of the sky. So I figure I'd just image as much as I can wide field, really learn every nook and cranny of the night sky. And then when I'm ready to upgrade to something with a longer focal length, then I'll know the spots that I think are really interesting that I want to zoom in on and image. So yeah, that's
Cool.
a little bit about me.
Wade, it's your turn. Some people may know Wade Prunty, but just in case they don't, Wade, tell them where you're from.
Hey, I'm well, where I'm from. I'm from Louisiana. So whenever you hear me talking about crawfish or boudin or something like that, that's why, because I love it. But I am in the DFW area now, in Texas, and we are actually right now looking for we're working on getting out of here and actually moving onto a homestead with dark skies. So that's the plan right now. And so from Louisiana, if I don't know if many of you are from there and know much about Louisiana, we have good food and casino boats. That's about it. And so science just isn't big on the on the radar for anyone there. So I didn't grow up doing this at all. It's funny, I tell people the only thing I knew about space, I didn't know the name of stars or anything. The only thing I knew is that that Pluto got a bad rap. Was how are you a planet one day and then not a planet the next? But anyway, and that's, I'm sporting my remember Pluto.
Never forget.
Never forget.
Yeah. So anyway, a couple years ago, actually it was about 2015 or something like that. My parents asked me, they were like, hey, what do you want for Christmas? You get to that age where they don't know what to get you, whatever. And I was like, I don't know. I don't, really have anything that I was like, I'd kind of like to get a telescope, So, so my mom bought me for Christmas a 8-inch Skywatcher, one of those flex tube collapsible Dobsonians.
Yeah.
And I took that out, and it took me a little while to figure it out, but I went out with it and looked through it and saw the moon and was just blown away, right? And I just got hooked, and from there I tried to figure out how to connect a camera to it to take a picture to show everybody what I was seeing. I was like, I'm seeing this with my eyes, you have to see it, and I'm not, I didn't realize, well, I mean, they, I would be taking a picture so they could just look at the moon pictures online too. But I just wanted to, I just figured I had to do it myself. So I went out there and I did that. And then from there, it was all downhill, emptied my life savings, put my 3-year-old to work, anything I could do to get gear. And I was when I started off, I bought that Schmidt Cassegrain, a 9 1/4 inch Schmidt Cassegrain. It was my first actual scope for imaging. And I mean, everybody was doing it online, Trevor and Dylan and Chuck. I was like, okay, I can do this. And I had that thing for a year, and one night I was just so upset. I was ready to sell it because I couldn't figure it out. Every time I'd slew to something, it'd never land on it. I couldn't find anything in the sky. And I kind of thought that it might be polar alignment, but I didn't know because I was new, and my scope didn't have a polar scope on it. It had one of those little, you could add one of those little off to the side things, and that just, so anyway, and I just went inside. I was really mad, sat down one night, just completely frustrated, and turned on YouTube, just started to veg out. But Trevor from Astro Backyard had put a video on of the Pole Master. and it was about a 5-minute video of him doing it. And before the video was over with, I had it purchased and overnighted to me. And so I hooked that up, and sure enough, that's what it was. It was polar alignment. And a couple days later, I took my first image, and so, kept going. And then because of COVID, we had to figure out ways for people to hang out. So we eventually made it to social media, right? To Instagram Live and Twitch and YouTube Live and all this stuff. And Dustin from OPT was doing Instagram and Twitch. And I was able to get on there and actually ask him questions that he immediately responded to and answered for me. And it was almost like going into a telescope shop, right? And talking to someone, right? And that it was huge. And so it just sparked it. So my point in all that is this type of stuff, that what y'all are doing here was big for me, right? It was a big deal for me to have something like what y'all are doing here for other people, because when we're talking during these meetings, we're in the chat all the time talking, asking questions, and Scott's really good at paying attention to those and reading them online, reading them on the air, and then talking about them and stuff. And that's a really big help to people. So especially when you have people that know what they're talking about, because you go down the rabbit hole of Facebook, you can be out of money and
still not have the answer.
And still not have the answer, man. And so anyway, but through all that, I met Jeff, I met you, Tyler, and I met, all of you. I didn't know anything about Explore Scientific until all of this, and now I've been to the office and, had a tour through there and everything.
Grand tour.
Yeah. So been in that back warehouse where y'all got your employees up on the pallets yelling at each other through the wall.
I don't know what you're talking about, Wade. Shush, Wade, shush.
But anyway, so big proponent for these type of streams and everything. I really appreciate what y'all do here with this.
Thank you.
So there's actually a couple questions, since you mentioned questions, from Tariq. He's wanting to know which scope to choose from when he wants to do solar. Does he want something that has a fast ratio or a real slow ratio? I haven't got into quite solar yet, so maybe you two would be able to help with that by chance.
I haven't done solar either, but it's my understanding that, I'm just guessing at this point, but I would assume that you don't need a fast F ratio because it's a super bright target.
Correct.
And it is a pretty large target, relatively. In the sky, it's the same size as the moon. I know after you throw on a super strong filter like the Daystar Quark or something like that, it's going to change the brightness a lot. But I'm assuming you still don't need a fast F ratio to image.
No, because Jason Genzel uses the 152 with the Daystar Quark. And that's the good thing about the Daystar is it lets a lot of light in because the 152 is a bigger aperture, but it's also a Barlow in that Daystar Quark, and it's a 4 times Barlow. I'm not sure if people are aware of that, because that thing will literally punch the sun, and it'll get close.
Can you pull that Barlow out, or does that Barlow have to stay in?
That Barlow has to stay in. That's part of it. It's an integrated system, unfortunately.
Oh, so that takes the ED or the 152 AR telescope from its native focal length to almost 4,000 millimeters.
Yeah.
Wow.
You can see the flag on the sun with that.
So F ratio, guys. We got Annie here. She's just now getting into astrophotography, so she's kind of familiar with DSLRs and that aspect of F ratio, but it's completely different with astrophotography. Jeff, I know you shoot at, oh goodness, what is it, a 4?
I think it's 4.5. For me, it depends on which lens or scope I'm using, right? If I'm using Go ahead.
I was going to ask, does it matter which target that you choose depending on the F ratio that you're wanting to do?
Sure, to an extent.
Yeah.
I mean, it's always going to be a factor, but I mean, if you're shooting something that's super dim, I mentioned the Spaghetti Nebula a minute ago. It's so dim.
That's dim. It's
You
very
can
dim.
pile on data and it's still dim. So something, if you know that your target is super dim, you're going to save yourself a ton of time by having a fast F ratio. Now, a lot of times fast F ratio comes with its own challenges also. Wade has a RASA. I have one back here also, F2.0, I believe. And when you get that fast, you have issues. I mean, any kind of tilt in your camera sensor will show up dramatically. You have to make sure you have the right filters designed for fast systems, or else you won't be taking full advantage of all of that speed. If the filters aren't designed for a fast optical system, you don't get the full transmission of the wavelengths you're trying to capture.
Correct.
Focus is super touchy with the fast F ratio. I mean, you might, like, I could image all night with my, with like the Celestron C8, barring other issues like mirror flop and that kind of stuff. But as temperature changes, that the focus on the C8 at 1250 millimeters or whatever it is with the reducer, the temperature change will affect it a little bit, but not anything like it will on the RASA. So everything's a bit more, not everything, but a lot of things are a lot more finicky, a lot more touchy when you get to a faster F ratio. But you get a ton more data in much shorter time.
Makes sense. Makes total sense. Wade, what are your thoughts on, do you prefer fast F ratios, or do you want to kind of back it up a little bit between the F4 and the F5? Kind of, I would consider that kind of a sweet spot, is the F5 to F6 ratio. Because I use one that goes down to 3.9, and that's pretty quick for what I need. I've never used a RASA in any way, shape, or form. I don't know if I ever will. Something about putting a camera on the front, it just scares the living crap out of me that I'm going to break that corrector instantly. It really does. So Wade, what do you think?
So, well, first off, when you start off with, it depends on where you're starting at as a beginner. Are you using camera lenses, or are you using an actual telescope? Your camera lenses immediately are going to give you the option. Usually they're going to give you the option to drop down to some really fast focal ratio, just because of the nature of a camera lens. But if you're going into telescopes, then that's something that you have to look at. Do you want fast? Do you want slow? Do you want something that might be longer and slower, but able to use like a reducer that will widen it up and speed it up, and give you kind of two scopes in one? There are things like that. And honestly, you've got the telescope thing, but then you do have the speed. So Jeff's mentioned, things like mirror flop and, all the things that you have to deal with in telescopes, flexure, back focus, which no one can ever figure out. All these different things. Well, that's just with regular telescopes. But when you introduce fast scopes, now you've got a whole nother set of issues that you have to deal with. And so I personally think that when you're a beginner, you should start off with some type of refractor. Now, I started off with a mirror, an SCT, but I really think that you should start off with some type of refractor. Make sure that it's a company like Explore Scientific that will help you with collimation issues or anything like that. But it'll remove some extra things that, as a beginner, you might not need to be worrying about. And that Schmidt-Cassegrain that I started with, there were so many things that I had to figure out before I could get started. And with a like an ED80 or something, I could have been out the gate quick with that. So I really like anything above f4.
Mhm.
I think is great to start out with, because then you can buy your traditional filters and you don't have
Yep.
anything to worry about there. Because whenever you get below that, your filters have to change. And I'd like to explain that, and I want to use a pair of scissors to do that. So
that's fine.
when you are, so let's look at this. When you're using let's just say an f4 slower scope, the light is coming in at an angle sort of like this. All right. And so a filter, the way a filter works is especially if you're using something like a narrow band filter, let's say a 3 nanometer narrow band filter, that filter is that 3 nanometer band pass that it allows through. The way that they got there, the way they were able to do that is by the thickness of the glass and by the coating. Whatever the coating that they put on it, right? So that all of that matters for that filter. And so when light is coming in at f4 slower, it goes through that filter the way that they planned on that filter working. The problem is whenever you go faster than that. So now we have this is our light here. This this edge of this light. Here's that path going down that edge. And you see the angle of that. Yeah. As light gets faster, that light cone starts looking like this. So now that light is coming down into that filter, and the path that the light takes, think about your filter. Let's say this was the thickness of my filter. Well, straight down, that filter might be 3 nanometers. But if your light is now coming through at an angle, it may be 3.2, 3.3 millimeters. That path that it's taking is longer. So remember, that filter's design for narrow band to work was based on its thickness and the coatings. So now you've basically changed the path of the thickness that light is going through. So the band pass that it is allowing through now is shifting. And so no longer is HA sitting on 656. It's sitting somewhere else. And so this is a very complex subject. And that's what happens when you get into things faster than F4. And that's why I say, when you are a beginner, this is not really something that you should be tackling. You need to go, you need to go to something that is, a little bit faster than that. F4 to F7 to F10, whatever. That's where you need to start at, and back off of the F2 Rosses and things. And I'm telling you, bless you. I have that Rasa. I'm surprised I have hair left, because that Rasa I have. It's been a challenge. I love it. It's a great telescope, but there's so many challenging things to a fast scope. So, as quick as my explanation was here, I think I would start off with a little bit slower than F4 on a telescope for someone, and I would start off with a refractor, so you have less issues that you have to deal with and overcome, less technical issues with the equipment that you have to overcome to get it working.
I have a quick thought there. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, you're fine. No, you're perfect.
Okay. I do think the sweet spot is somewhere between the F4 to F, 6, 7-ish area. Your focal ratio is directly tied to your aperture and your focal length. So if you've got something like an F10 as a beginner, that means you're most likely going to have a very long focal length scope also. And that brings its own challenges also. Just like a fast scope has its challenges, a long focal length scope has its challenges too. You're zooming in, quote unquote, zooming in much further. So every little thing is magnified, including the errors that you might have.
Right.
So a wind gust that you might not even notice at 400 millimeters, you notice at 1200 millimeters, or flexure between your guide scope and your imaging scope, or anything, small guiding errors and that kind of stuff. So I do think for a beginner, the sweet spot is somewhere in the 4 to 7 range.
Yeah, I agree. I would definitely agree with that. Josh Kovich is asking, can I do solar with my Z130 with a focal length of 1550 millimeters after a 2x Barlow? Well, Josh, I would say yes, you can, but please, please, please use precautionary equipment when looking at the sun, because it will blind you permanently or burn camera sensors completely out faster than you can put them in. It will melt everything. So please be careful when imaging the sun. Always take your precautions that you need to. But yes, you can do it theoretically. So guys, I know you guys want to talk. Oh, Annie, what was your question? You had a question.
I didn't have a question. I was going to reiterate on the beginner. One of the things that I quickly learned when starting here was that beginner should always start off with an ED80, just because it gives room for error. You don't get frustrated and things like that. The thing that's really interesting about some people that start astrophotography, they want to go big or go home, and so they like to buy all the grand things, and then they get their one shot, and then they move on to the next object, and it's not what it's not working out or whatever. But so that's in my personal journey in astrophotography. I've learned that every little tiny thing can affect your image. And so I mean, just even after having my Canon Astro modified, I was shocked at how much light it let in. And so but I just an ED80 is great because it's just like a lens, and so I think people sometimes do get overwhelmed about back focus and things like that. And so anyway, so I'm still learning. In fact, I was cleaning my telescope today, getting it ready to get a camera put on it. But anyway, so yeah, it's either go big or go home with some people, and unfortunately that doesn't work out well in the long run. So, but an ED80 is it's a great starter,
I agree. I think a big misconception with people getting started in astronomy, astrophotography, is that they need something big with a long focal length, because they want, space is far away, so they want to zoom super close in. But people don't realize that a lot of these targets are huge. They're much bigger in angular size in the sky than the moon, much bigger, multiple times bigger than the moon. So that was something that tripped me up in the beginning also. Having a short focal length scope there's nothing wrong with it. It has a ton of advantages. There's so much to image and to see with a short focal length scope. And I did want to say one other thing about camera lenses. They are very versatile, of course, but oftentimes if I'm doing wide field stuff with the camera lens for astrophotography, astrophotography is very challenging on optics. You've got these point sources of light that if you have some kind of field curvature or aberrations on the edge of your field of view with terrestrial photography, you don't notice it. You don't notice a little bit of coma or something when you've got trees in the corner of your field of view, but when you have stars, you see that. So even a lot of the fast lenses, like an f2 lens, I've tried some and they don't meet my expectations. So I end up stopping them down anyway to f4 or 5 or whatever it might be, until the corners of the field of view still look sharp. So that's something to consider also.
So great. Well, we got one topic down. Now we got to go over field of view. Now, Jeff, I know you have a ton of images of your wide field. I call it your wide field epidemic. That you take phenomenal pictures in the wide field area, because that's all I mainly see you do, honestly, is wide field. So I like wide field astrophotography because I have a wide 280 millimeter scope as well. So I love the wide, capture everything in one shot. So if you want to share some of your images of what you've got and kind of explain,
Yeah.
you know, the process and what you've done, and just kind of go over some of your targets, and then Wade, we can get to you as well to show some of your stuff, because I know you got some fantastic images that are wide field as well. So whenever you're ready.
Yeah, thank you for the kind words, first of all. And I will share my screen here and talk about that a little bit. Can you see that?
We're gonna wait on the lag on the YouTube, and then eventually we
I can
will.
see it. Yes.
Cool.
Yeah, there it is.
All right. So this is my Astro Bin page. If you're not familiar with Astro Bin, it's one of the astrophotographer's #1 tools, I think. You can search for different targets that you want to look for and see other people's images and look at the specs that they've used and the exposure times and the filters and all of that. So looking here, I'm going to show, first of all, just for fun, this is my first deep sky object I ever took. And it was with the Celestron Nexstar 8SE. And I was actually on the original Alt-Az mount that comes with it. So I was limited to 15-second exposures, which I took 176 of them and got that. And then, you know, upgraded to an equatorial mount and learned more and more and more. And then this was my first wide field shot that I did. You know, when I introduced myself, I talked about doing narrow band, super wide field stuff. This is kind of what I had in mind. What I was envisioning was this, and
Beautiful.
I absolutely love this. I learned a lot doing this photograph. You can see this is the Canon 50mm f1.4, but I actually stopped it down. Oh, I thought I wrote it in here, but I didn't.
It was like
I
F4
stopped
or
it.
something like that.
I stopped it down to f4.
Yeah.
Because the stars in the corners didn't look good at wide open, and they didn't look acceptable until I got to f4. So this was a lot of fun to do, and this is what really, the image that really got me hooked on it. You see, I did 17 1200 second subs, and then 36 600 second subs. I used to think that doing super long exposures was the only way to go super deep on an object.
Yeah.
Which it's not. As long as you're going long enough to swamp your read noise, then you want to just get as much exposure time and, you know, as many subs as you can from that point. So this is the image that really sparked my interest in doing the wide field, really wide field astrophotography.
Yeah, that's wide field.
Super wide. Yeah. This is also super wide. This, let me look at the specs here. This was at 60mm, stopped down to f5.6.
That's crazy.
I
loved that one when you posted that. I love that shot of Pleiades in California Nebula.
Me
that was
too.
Amazing.
Yeah, it's all the dust though that's amazing.
Yeah, and that's what gets me is the dark dust lanes.
Yeah.
Yes. Now, this was actually done from a dark sky site, a Bortle 4. I live in a Bortle 8, so this shot with all that dust wouldn't be possible from my house. So I had a couple nights at a dark sky site and was able to get this.
Yeah.
And what I really like about this shot is the framing, the how it goes straight across from the California to the Pleiades. And I do want to show you the framing tool that I use here in a minute after we look at a couple more images. I think that's going to be really helpful.
How do you, so Jeff, when you're thinking of what you're wanting to image, how do you know, what do you want to image? I mean, there's a lot of stuff out there. There really is that no one's really ever captured. And I guess that's, I envy you because you go for the stuff that's super wide that no one really captures because everybody's wanting to get in there all nice and tight on certain things. So what makes you want to pick a certain object for wide field?
I look at different planetarium apps and software. I'll actually go ahead and open this up now. So Telescopius is probably my favorite tool to use at this point. And so in here, there's a toolbox and you have the astrophotography or the telescope simulator. Yeah. So actually you see it's pulled up right here already. this is not my field of view. The scope I've been using is 180 millimeter focal length, and where's the oh yeah, the camera I use is the 2600 MC Pro. So this is my field of view with a scope that I've been using for the last year or so, 180 millimeters. This is the TPO ultra wide 180 scope, and this is close to the framing of the target that I just posted a few days ago. So what I love about this, let's pull this out wider and say we've got a 50 millimeter lens on there, right? Now, what I love about this tool is the survey function right here. So it defaults to deep sky survey color. So you can put up a wide field of view here and start panning around and seeing what you have. So, you know, Orion, the Rosette Nebula, Christmas tree cluster, and the Cone Nebula.
Didn't know that.
Down here, you've got the Seagull, and Thor's helmet is down there somewhere. So I love this. And what I end up doing when I'm trying to frame out a target is I go really wide field so I can see what's going on. But what I love about Telescopius is that you can select different surveys. So this is all fine, the deep sky survey color. But if you change this over to, say, deep sky survey red,
you see all the hydrogen alpha.
then yeah, you're seeing all of this. So now you know, like, wow, there is a lot of faint stuff around here that I can image. So I'll just get on here. This is what I was talking about earlier, seeing that the flaming star and tadpoles and the spaghetti nebula, super faint right there, are so close to each other. So anyway, I'll get on here and just pan around until I see something that looks really good to me. What I really also enjoy here in these surveys is looking at the H alpha surveys.
Yeah.
So like this one, I mean, you see all of this super faint nebulosity in here. I mean, look at all this over here that you wouldn't normally see in just normal planetarium software. Like I love Sky Safari, for example. I love being able to use my phone or my iPad to pan around and just see what I want to image and help locate things. But it doesn't have anything like this. So there's a couple of H alpha surveys in here that you can choose from. And so then once I find a region that I really, really like this last one that I did, I'll go back and put in my info again. So say 180 millimeters. And then I can start to see where all the really faint stuff is here. And it also lets you change your rotation here. So I can frame it up exactly how I want it, which my last photo was somewhere around there, approximately. And it shows you, it will spit out your, where is it? Here, it'll show you your coordinates. And it will show you your rotation angle if you click on the camera tab. So you see that's 140.9 degrees east. And here's my RA and DEC coordinates. Now, if you have something like the ASI Air Pro, you can actually use this on your phone or your tablet, and you can copy CSV.
Yes. And
then go into the framing tool in, or I think it's in plan mode or something in the ASI Air Pro, and you can hit like the import from Telescopius. There's like an import coordinates or something. You can import all of this so that the telescope will go straight to those coordinates. Now, the problem you have there is rotation. So as long as you
fix.
if you know what angle it's supposed to be, what I did, I basically spent half a night or so just taking pictures and plate solving and then rotating a little bit at a time until I got it to the exact angle that I wanted it to be.
Yeah. And yes, Jim Astro, this is a free program. It is, I believe it's telescopius.net.
It's a web-based application.
Yeah, it's a web-based program.
So does this help you plan your imaging night easier?
Oh yeah.
it helps me plan what my target is. Yeah.
Okay.
As far as and my rotation.
Okay.
So in that regard, yeah, it helps a ton.
Yeah.
I mean, normally if you're looking at something like Sky Safari, for example,
Mhm.
you see this. So that's cool and all, but yeah, let me think of a shot where let's see, like this has so much nebulosity below it that you don't see in most images. And where is that? Let me go back to the H alpha survey and try to find that. Let's go out to like 35 millimeters.
Now, was that the rosette that you were kind of looking at, or?
The rosette is right there, right next to the Cone
Right
Nebula
next to it.
Christmas tree
Okay.
cluster. Let's see. Well, I can't seem to find that cosmic question mark right now, but here's Cygnus, right? So
Yeah.
if we zoom in a little bit further on that, we'll go up to
Mhm.
like 60 millimeters. You start to see that there's a ton of faint stuff. So this is what you would see in something like Sky Safari.
Mhm.
And you can kind of see some of the nebulosity that's going around, that's happening in this region. But if you switch the survey over to the H alpha surveys, that might not be the best one for this one. Let's try the DS. No, that was definitely the best one. Or let's try the DSS red. You start to see where a lot of the really faint stuff is.
Yeah, and you start knowing where exactly it is.
Yeah.
in the
So
sky.
like, say I was going to use my TPO 180 millimeter scope and shoot the North America Nebula. Let's just switch this over to red. You see this? So you might just frame it up. You might have your camera at 0-degree rotation, just like this, and plate solve directly to your target, North American Nebula, and this would be the image that you get. But after looking at this survey, you start to see, well,
There's a lot more around it.
Offset this a little bit.
Mhm.
You get all of this nebulosity too, this faint stuff, if you are willing to put in the integration time to get that stuff. And then you tweak your camera rotator or the angle from here and really start to find the best way to get all of the nebulosity that you want to get. You might decide you want to get the butterfly nebula here, Satyr in it. But if you rotate it around, oh, that's cropping. If you rotate it around and say like, oh, look, you get some of this up here, these little faint wispy things, and still get the North America or the butterfly nebula in there as well. And here you see the crescent nebula tiny down there. You might want to rotate so that you're getting all of that in there.
That's insane.
What's your focal length here?
This is 180 millimeters.
Okay.
And so, yeah, with a normal planetarium that doesn't have the option to choose different surveys, probably going to get something like the DSS color, which this is not bad. But you really get to see a lot more of the faint stuff when you start looking at the hydrogen alpha surveys and the individual channels of the surveys.
That's crazy.
So going back to look at that last one, you start to see a lot of that stuff that was in those surveys.
Mhm.
This top corner up here, I'm gonna turn off the plate solving. I know it's silly, but like this up here in this corner, there's all of this nebulosity up there that you don't see in a lot of people's images, but you see it in Telescopius with the right catalog or the right survey chosen, sorry. So we'll go Cone Nebula and center on that. So that stuff that we were just looking at, this up here in the top left corner, you don't see it normally with just a regular survey, but if I switch over to, let's see which one of these, not that one, not that one. There was one of them that showed it, I thought. No, I don't remember where I saw that, but so there's a ton of surveys to choose from. So you're basically looking at different wavelengths of light here, and it's just super helpful to be able to choose from all of these different surveys. Not all of them are going to show you useful information like this for astrophotography, but a lot of them will.
Yeah.
And, actually, I think that's that nebulosity right there that was in the top left corner. So I just didn't match up my framing right here in Telescopius as it was in my actual image. But yeah, this is 102 hours approximately at 180 millimeters, and got the rotation and the framing exactly how I wanted it. And I did that using Telescopius. So yeah, to answer your question, it's a long way to answer it, but to frame things up, I will come in Telescopius, bring it out super wide.
And just find something faint as faint can get.
Yeah, you start to see where all of the nebulosity is, and then you find the picture that you want to take.
Yeah.
And then the challenge becomes, how much integration time do I really need to pile on before I start seeing that faint stuff that I really want to get?
Yeah.
I think that's neat how it sets a foundation for what you're going to be shooting. You know, it can only get better from there.
And you can take these numbers and plug them into Nina, into ASI or Pro Plus, all of that, and you're there. You're at what you were looking at. Now your field of view, your rotation is going to be, you're going to have to work on that unless you're cool and have a rotator. But that's the only thing really that you got to work on and get that right. But yeah, this site is extremely beneficial for pre-planning your tours.
Oh yeah,
really cool.
Yeah.
I'll show one other thing I'd like to show you really quickly in here is the Mosaic tool that they have.
That's nice to have.
Speaking of field of view, so when you're here, you got Mosaic settings, and you can change the grid size. So say you want, that would be a super wide shot. So we want to go 1:2, and then you start to see, okay, if I did 2 panels here, you can change how much you want the overlap of your panels to be. And a big challenge here actually is here. So rotate panes to preserve alignment. If you have a rotator, this shows you here. Yeah, this shows you the coordinates of each pane, right? Pane 1, pane 2, the coordinates, and it shows you the rotation angle that you need to have it look like this. So if you have a rotator, then your first pane will go here and rotate to 147.7 degrees. Your second panel will go here and rotate to 137. But if you don't have a rotator, you have to uncheck this, because as you move around the sky, the angle, your rotation angle matters. So you see here how they don't line up perfectly.
No.
So if you don't have a rotator and you don't want to rotate between panels, you have to uncheck that, and then you choose how much you want it to overlap. If you see these lines right here, the more that I let these overlap, you start to see them converge and then actually overlap there. So if you don't want to rotate between your panels, you might end up needing to do something like a 30% overlap to make sure that you don't have any spaces in between, or that you actually have enough overlap for it to look good. And this is exactly what I did with this shot right here, which is one of my favorites.
And what he's talking about is, if you've ever seen one of those images where someone did a mosaic and there's like a a triangle slither of black somewhere,
Might be at the top.
or a corner that's
Yeah.
missing because they didn't have enough data. Their field of view and their setup wasn't in the position to grab that. So that's what Telescopius is helping you with right
Yeah.
there.
So I think I ended up doing something like a 30% overlap with this shot, and this was 50 millimeters, 50 millimeter lens, stopped down to f4 once again, but this was a 2-pane mosaic, so a total of 40 hours integration, and the panes on this one were pretty much split down the middle. But this is one of my favorite shots that I've done, and just being able to get that wide of a field of view on the Milky Way. If you go too wide with a single frame, you start to lose resolution.
Yeah.
So that's one of the benefits of doing a mosaic, is you get that wide field of view, but you maintain the resolution.
Well,
So
Wade?
that's how I do my framing, basically. And I think this process that I do, I'm sure I'm not the only person that does this, but I think it's
I think you're the only one I've seen that ever actually goes out that far.
like as far as the wide field of view.
The wide field of view.
Sure.
I've never messed with mosaics. I'm scared to death to do mosaics. In fact, I still have to process the Spaghetti Nebula because I had to break it up into a mosaic.
It's huge, yeah.
Yeah, it is a massive target. And so if I have questions, I know who to come to now.
Absolutely. You know where to find me.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of people out there that have done these wide fields before. If you get on, if you go through Astro Bin, you'll find people that have done that.
Yeah.
But in the last few years, astrophotography has really took on like a kind of a rock star type of culture. Like it's become kind of cool, with the YouTube stuff and everything, and all these people that especially when COVID started and everybody was stuck at home and needed a new hobby, and people started buying equipment and everything, and what everybody's going after right now is eye candy, right? They're looking for that stuff that is, it makes a pretty picture, right? And if you don't know, that you can go look at these different sky surveys and that this stuff is out there at those wide field, a lot of times you don't go for that, right? And when people think wide field, they think Milky Way shots, right? With the with a composite with a wooded background or cityscape or something like that. That's what they think wide field. They don't. So they have this idea of either it's that or it's right up in the face of like the North American Nebula, instead of grabbing the whole constellation with everything in there. So anyway, it's so some people have done it in the past. It's just that we're seeing so much stuff roll through today that's just eye candy that we don't, and not many of those people are doing that, except for like Jeff. I mean, so he's the king of wide field now. So
yeah, I like that Iris Nebula. That is nice.
I do too. I was going to see if we could take a look at what that looks like. This is the Iris Nebula in whatever survey that is, the DSS Red. Not a lot there. Is this is on target? Yeah.
It's just
I'm at 50 millimeters. That's why. So yeah, if you go zoom in at 180 millimeters, and then switch the survey to say DSS Blue, it's still not even showing up.
No, it's a very, very faint object.
Yeah. I doubt we're going to see the Iris Nebula in any of the H alpha surveys, so that's not worth doing.
Who shoots the Iris Nebula at 180 millimeter?
Jeff.
Well, there's a lot back there.
Yeah.
There's a lot of dust and stuff you can start to see.
Yeah.
On the different surveys.
Now, Jeff, did you shoot that in Nashville, or did you have to go to your dark sky site?
This was also at my dark sky site. I was only able to spend one night on this one. Actually, just 4 hours and 8 minutes.
That's nuts.
Yeah, but this is that wide field, and you know, when you see the iris in there, and most people zoom in on just the iris here,
Mm-hmm.
but when you look back and see what's actually surrounding it, there's so much dust. And I really wanted to frame this up so that I forget what this is called, but it's a pretty popular target right there. I don't know if you could even see my mouse. And then on the right side, this whole whatever LBN 468, kind of like that arrow pointing to the left towards the iris.
Yeah.
I really wanted to frame that up so that it was kind of all horizontally lined up like that in the center of the frame with all the dust around it. And I did this using Telescopius. And then, so I really enjoy the wide field stuff. And like I said earlier, I'm learning the night sky and every nook and cranny as I continue to take more and more wide field stuff. And then, you know, maybe next year or the year later, I'll start zooming in on the spots that I think are really interesting that I want to get closer on.
Well, dadgum. I know you have an announcement. We haven't even got to Wade yet. It's already 5 o'clock. Holy moly. That is crazy. That is crazy. Jeff, I really appreciate you showing all this stuff, man. I hope everybody in the audience learned something. Wade, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but we're going to have you on next week so we can...
Is that really bad news?
Well, it's not bad news for
bad
Wade.
news.
Wade likes being on TV. He loves it. If that's okay with you, Wade, we can come up, me and you can get together this weekend, come up with a topic, and we can show some of your images as well and kind of give you the spotlight as well. Annie, I know you had some announcements that you
I
wanted
have an
to do.
announcement. I have an announcement.
Well, then announce it.
So I know a couple of weeks ago that we announced that we were going to be doing a galaxy photo photography.
Astrophotography contest.
Thank you. I'm very tired. Sorry. And I've been trying to quit coffee. Anyway. Anyways, we have that is evolving. A couple of shows ago, I mentioned that there were going to be some changes to that. So our astrophotography contest is evolving. We are now going to do a yearly contest, and the way it will work, it's going to be called Photon.
Hashtag Photon.
Hashtag Photon.
Hashtag
excuse
Photon.
me, and old age kicking in. Anyways, hashtag Photon. It's going to start April 1st. We're going to run it through the rest of the year. In October, what's going to happen is we'll open up voting. It'll be on the website. We'll open up voting to everybody to vote on those images that we get submit. Well, it's going to be a different way of submitting it. So the way images are going to be submitted in this contest, we'll see how it goes. Tyler's like, you're in your own boat, Annie. You're just like, trip over your words. Anyways, swims. Anyways, the way things are going to be submitted this time is you submit them on social media with the hashtag Photon, and then a 30-second to 1 minute video of how you captured the image. Of course, not anything really long because it just, it's social media. So, and then we're going to be following that hashtag, and we're going to take those photos and upload them onto our website. And then in October, we'll open that voting up to everybody because, we're a community and we want everybody's opinion. So, and we will dwindle those down to about 10 contestants, and then it'll go in-house voting. And we'll have first, second, and third place announced in December. And I'm not going to announce the prizes right now because we're still working on that. And it is exciting. It is like you want to enter, like you want to enter. You really, really, really want to enter this contest, and it's really, really easy. So I mean, literally, just start uploading your stuff with that hashtag Photon to your social media, and we're going to start following that. And we've got some great, exciting things coming up with it. And so yeah, that's my little spoiler.
ED 115.
What did you say?
An ED 115.
Wade, I'll tell you what.
You want
I will tell you what, Wade. If you win, I will find you a 115. If you win, I will personally find you a 115, and I will give you one. Because we love you here at Explore Scientific. That's why.
I figured
So-
you could. Don't you have a machine shop in the back? You could just go machine me one.
He's giving away all the dirty secrets. That darn tour ruined him.
Shouldn't have let him in.
I know. But guys, that's our show for today. I hope you learned a little bit of something about F ratio. And in case you were wanting to know how to do the calculation of F ratio, all you really need to do is take the focal length and you divide it by aperture, and I believe it is in inches. Scott, you may have to correct me, but it should be just the focal length divided by the aperture in inches, correct?
It can be in millimeters. So
It can be in millimeters
your
too.
focal length, whether you do it in centimeters, inches, millimeters, nanometer, whatever you want,
He's getting real technical now.
and use the same, numerical, counting as for the aperture. So it's focal length divided by aperture. This is true of camera lenses, telescope lenses, binoculars, anything. That is, and that's the reason why it's just called F ratio. It's this number that when you think of a lens and you go, okay, it's a 1,000 millimeter f2. Well, you know that the aperture is 500 millimeters if it's 1,000 millimeter f2. Okay.
Yeah.
So that just kind of puts a picture in your head. For photographers, land photographers, yes, it does. There are certain things they focus on about that, and astrophotographers, they focus on other things, like the full width half max, as it relates to focal length.
Mhm.
Okay, but the F ratio itself is just a number used by anyone that's looking at lenses and that form images. So, but that's that.
But again, I want to thank Jeff.
There was a question about the
Yep.
contest, and someone asked, so you have to be submitted as video. That's part of it, Josh. What you're going to do, there'll be a whole description of exactly how you do it. But basically what's going to happen is you're going to submit your photo. You can image process it if you want, but we're also going to ask for raw files, okay, at one point. And you
Yep.
are going to make a quick 30-second to 1 minute video of how you made this image, what you did, so if you can't explain it in 30 seconds to 1 minute, you really don't understand how you did it yourself. So, sometimes
Yep.
it takes practice. It's like, well, that's true. It's true. That's true.
But I
You might
want
want to
to.
talk longer than that, but that's the deal. So we want to make sure that you understand, your process.
Yeah.
By doing this, it will challenge you to refine your process.
Yeah.
So we have
Exactly.
lots of ideas on how to make this contest very cool and a challenge. So that's it for right now.
So again, I want to thank special guests Jeffery Horne or Jeff Horne, the wide field master, and as well as Mr. 106.3 hour man of the North American Nebula.
Yeah.
Get it right that time, Wade?
Yes.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, good. So that's it here on today's episode of Explore Scientific. I'm tired. I hope everybody has clear skies and keeps looking up.
Thanks, Tyler. Thank you, Jeffrey and Wade, and to our audience, thank you very much. If you have some free time tonight, the Astronomical Live and their 15th program will be having a show on these very channels that you're watching, and their subject is going to be nightscape photography. So I think you're going to really like it. Mike Shaw is their special guest, and he's an internationally recognized astrophotographer. He's an author of 2 books on astrophotography. He's a delegate of the International Dark Sky Association and a member of the Minnesota Astronomical Society. So he is the featured speaker. Of course, they have other great people that'll be on the program, including comet discoverer David Levy. So that comes on in just under an hour We'll see you then.
Take care, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks.